It's Thursday, August 8th, 2024, and you're watching the MMA Eco Live podcast. I am your host, Chris Presnell, host of MMA Ecosystem, covering Asian MMA from all the way up from China, Korea, Japan, all the way down to Southeast Asia and India. So really glad that you're with us. Sorry, that was a wacky thing on the screen right there. But yeah, happy to have you with me today, episode 63, I believe. And on today's show, we're going to get to a lot of the Asian MMA this weekend and then even up until next week, because next Tuesday, we've got a pretty big day at Contender Series where there's like 3-3-ish Asian fighters on the card. So I'm really pumped about that. Yeah, we've got a lot to get through today. If you haven't subscribed already to the channel, go ahead and do that. Hit a thumbs up on the video. Really appreciate that when you do. I actually just about an hour and a half ago, 2.5 hours ago, spoke to one of the competitors at Dana White's Contender Series this upcoming Tuesday. That's Ding Meng, a Chinese welterweight. That interview will be up later on the channel, so be watching for that. I talked to him about his time in the U.S., talked to him about Las Vegas, the opponent switch, why his original opponent dropped out, all that good stuff. So you can catch that later on the channel. Overall was just like the most chill dude ever. I was working with both him and then his translator, Bill, who is a older Chinese guy that has been living in the States for a long time. He was translating for Ding Meng, and he has been involved with Chinese MMA ever since like the very first event in China, an Art of War event back in like the early 2000s. So I've actually been going through a lot of those events as well. So it's kind of cool to see his fingerprint on Chinese MMA history. But yeah, it was good to connect with the both of them. Even after the interview was over, we're just chatting for a little while, talking about like Ding Meng comes from the Chinese city that I used to live in, Xi'an, and so we kind of connected over that. Was able to use a little bit of my Chinese language, which is really fun. And we even had a drop in. This was off air, but Bate Bowl ended up popping in too. Got to talk to him for the first time, actually, like face to face. We've chatted over messaging, but he is going to be cornering Ding Meng this upcoming Tuesday at Contender Series. Then the next morning, he's hopping on a plane to Australia to corner Li Jingliang at UFC 305 in Sydney, Australia, right? Sydney. It's the Sydney card. Yeah. Opening fight of that main card in Sydney, Australia. So Bate Bowl, a really busy guy. He told me he's doesn't have a fight lined up just now. So, but he's looking at, he's got an opportunity maybe in October. So that was kind of his time frame for things. And almost why I asked that was because it looks like, or at least I have no inside knowledge of this, but my friend, he just goes by the matchmaker, right, on Twitter. He posted that a guy named Jonathan Piersma is looking. He's saying all signs are pointing towards him fighting on in a road to UFC non-tournament fight. He fights at welterweight. So, kind of doing the math there, assuming that the other fighter in that equation would be some kind of Asian fighter. There's not a whole lot of options, even, the broader lens of things. I went through the UFC roster to see if anyone new had been added today. No new Asian fighters, kind of leading me to think that most likely we will get a repeat fighter from Road to UFC fighting against Jonathan Piersma. That would be Kiwan Bean. That would be probably not Tai Laka, but it could be Samander Muradov. He's in the U.S. So I don't have any inside knowledge on that, but just kind of guessing there. And I wondered if Bate Bowl could be an option, but it doesn't sound like he is, especially since he's going to be going to Australia here soon. So watch for that interview with Ding Meng later. Hopefully later today. If not that, then it will be in the morning. So yeah, looking forward to that fight. Also, guys, really looking forward to Lonar Kavanaugh against Antoine Ho. I I really it's such a cool time for Vietnamese MMA because you've got Quang Le fighting this Saturday at UFC on very short notice against Chris Gutierrez. Really tough fight. Quang Le, he's 8-0, but he's 32 years old. So I feel like even though Chris Gutierrez has a lot more experience than him, Quang Le, he's right in his prime. So I am glad he picked up the opportunity. I think it's smart for him to take that opportunity, even though it is on short notice against a really tough guy in Chris Gutierrez. So excited for that, and just overall for like Vietnamese MMA, Southeast Asian MMA. You got to think the UFC wants as many Southeast Asian fighters as they can get. Why is that? Because they go to Singapore, because they want to go to Jakarta, because they want to build their presence in Thailand. The UFC would love they've just never really had that many fighters from Southeast Asia. They've got Jekka, they've got Quang Le. They don't have anyone from Singapore. They've got Loma from Thailand. But that's about it from Southeast Asia. So getting more of those fighters so they can fill out more of these Southeast Asia shows, actually maybe put some local fighters on them for once. We've got a big fight this weekend with Quang. And then next Tuesday, you've got Antoine Ho, also from Vietnam, 6-0, fighting against Lonar Kavanaugh. That should be a tremendous fight. It's a little bit... sorry, I keep bumping the camera here, but this is a hard fight for me to pick. I watched both of those guys' most recent fights just a little bit ago, and I was like, gosh, I have no idea who's going to take this. Antoine Ho wrestles and scrambles really well. Pretty good striking. Lonar Kavanaugh, really good striking, hits really hard for a flyweight. I really couldn't tell you who I think is going to win this fight. So really looking forward to that. It's one of those fights. It's a shame that they have to fight each other and not someone else, because I feel like both of them could probably get at least a little bit of traction on that lower end of the flyweight division. Flyweight is such a hot topic right now with Muhammad Mokaev, and both of these guys, Lonar and Antoine, are both the kind of guys that the UFC would love to have in their division. Super, super exciting top to bottom. So I'm looking forward to that. Ding Meng fights Rami Hamed on the same event, which was, I reported that fight yesterday. Basically just like I had heard that Ding Meng had just signed a new contract against a new opponent. And then things kind of came together quickly. I reached out and was able to figure out from both sides that it was going to be the fight. So, Rami Hamed has been one of these guys that has been in the UFC crosshairs for a long time. He was supposed to be on road to UFC last year in a non-tournament fight. They wanted him to fight Kim Hun Sol, I believe. That didn't end up coming together. And then he was supposed to be on Contender Series, I think last October, but he got injured. So I'm guessing the UFC was probably preparing for him to fight. There we go. Lost our audio for a second. I'm guessing the UFC wanted Rami Hamed to fight later in Contender Series, just since he's kind of been right there for a long time. So they're probably just moving him up. Is what I guess would happen. As far as how the fight goes, I don't really have a prediction on that either. Not too familiar with Rami Hamed, but Ding Meng, I have been watching some of his fights, and almost his demeanor in our interview, just the most chill. I asked him about Rami Hamed and if this was much of a disruption. if not having much time to prepare for a specific opponent, and the response that he gave me was just "Measure," which means no problem, and he's just like, yeah, I don't care. Like he's been training actually with Timo Oyama the last couple weeks, and they've put together already a game plan for Rami Hamed. So yeah, they've already looked at him, already kind of scouted him, and they feel ready for him. So really looking forward to it. His fighting style is pretty devastating. He's a Sanda striker. He is pretty versatile. He throws single strike combinations. He throws single strikes. He throws combinations, goes high, goes low, really nasty body kicks, and overall a lot of different ways that he could finish the fight. Heavy hitter, big welterweight. So on the feet, at the very least, it's Rami Hamed's going to take some damage for sure. So, but you would never know that by his demeanor. He's just such a nice, chill dude. So that's what I'm really looking forward to as well. We also, guys, tomorrow we've got kind of an interesting show here. Brave CF has been they've always been a pretty high quality organization, but they're stepping into Chinese MMA for the first time, doing another WLF co-promoted show. But I wanted to show you this card real quick. It's going to take place in Zhengzhou, which is where the WLF studio is, their headquarters. Which is that? There's no venue listed here, and I never saw tickets go on sale, so I'm guessing this is probably at the WLF studio at Hunan TV, especially since they're doing the partnership with them. But overall, some of these fights, I'm just kind of like, whatever. But we do have Kerem Wiley Maimai Tuahati on here fighting this guy, Izzadine Al-Derbani. And he's on a 2-fight win streak. Kerem Wiley's on a 2-fight win streak. And I think he's also recently maybe gone into some boxing. So not always a tough opponent. This guy, Izzadine Al-Derbani, fights out of Jordan. 36-year-old bantamweight. That should be interesting. But I see here, look at that. Foundation style is Sanda. So this could be really interesting. He fits in really well with this card. And, he's been fighting, looks like, for Brave UAE Warriors for a while, mostly kind of fighting his whole career in the Middle East. Kind of had a nice little win streak right there, but not really sure what to really expect from this guy. But for the most part, I mean, Kerem Wiley, I think he's a pretty exciting fighter. Wrestles well, decent boxing. You see that he fought both for WLF against a Korean guy, and then he went over to EFC Global. He is ethnically from Kyrgyz, and so he's got that first round TKO over this guy. Although this Russian guy, not sure where they found him. Kind of a weird win. Would actually be not the best look if he ended up losing that, but it looks like it looks like he was supposed to fight someone else. I'm just now starting to remember this. Fights happen every single weekend. It's hard to remember things, guys. But otherwise, it looks like Brave brought a pretty strong team with them. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up getting the overall upper hand from this event, but you do have two other good prospects here. You've got Uchi Yabu fighting Borislav Nikolic from Serbia. Uchi Yabu definitely looks like he's taking a pretty big step up here. He did go to One Pride, got a win on that show, and now they're putting him up against this guy from Brave. So he's actually fought pretty internationally in terms of opponents in his career. 6-1 record, and I think he trains with E Fight. He's from the E ethnic minority, or no, he's with a Guochang Fighting Club and fights at featherweight. So this guy Borislav Nikolic, 31-year-old bantamweight. I mean, he's been fighting in Brave. He's probably fought a lot of pretty tough opponents. You got Brad Katona on there, Gamzat Magomedov. So this guy is going to be a massive step up for Ajiyabu. Definitely probably an underdog in this fight. And so it'd probably be a nice upset and huge feather in his cap if he could beat Nikolic. And then this, for all intents and purposes, kind of the main event of the WLF versus Brave portion. Zhang Qinghe against Bryce Picaud. Zhang Qinghe has this 14-6 record, but I think he's been on a pretty nice tear, if I'm not mistaken. 4-fight win streak, 3 wins by TKO, and he even the standout win there. He's got a couple standout wins actually, but the main one I'm looking at is this first round KO at Octagon. He fought in this Octagon main event last April against Sundet Eitkol and blasted him with that overhand right. I remember that, and really big upset. I was not expecting him to win that, but then he goes and finishes off this guy Mario Satyamura in 7 seconds at One Pride. So this is a guy to really look at. I mean, you imagine if Zhang Qinghe wins this fight against this French guy at Brave. You got to think like you're getting into like, you know, road to UFC kind of contention. You're starting to get on like that top of the prospect list area. If you fight three international opponents with pretty good records, you're starting to get there. So that I think is the biggest storyline of the fight. Watching Zhang Qinghe, is he going to be able to kind of go into the next level of prospect mode? If so, then you know he's starting to get on that UFC bubble. So very interested in that. I never really know. This says watch Brave on DAZN. I know they've got their Brave website as well. I was kind of looking at it this week, and details were a little bit sketchy. So I'll look at that again, and if I can, I'll watch the event live. Looks like it's slated to begin at about 4 a.m. my time. So we'll see what happens, I guess. But that's Brave this weekend. I've also got Quang Le fighting at the UFC event. We've also got Toshiomi Kazama fighting at the same UFC event, and he's really got his back to the wall, doesn't he? I think a lot of people were shocked that he got signed by the UFC. He's got Shu Hirata, his manager, in his corner, so that you know, he's got a good relationship with the UFC, and they were able to get him a multi-fight deal. And then his first 2 fights have not gone all that well either, so you got to think this is do or die for Toshiomi Kazama. He's going to be fighting against Charalampos Gregorio, a guy from Cyprus who's fought out of Contender Series, I think also winless in the UFC. So you know, this is a fighter that if you are anything close to UFC ready, you should beat. No offense to Gregorio, but yeah, let's be honest. Like, they're both kind of at the bottom of the heap here and having to prove themselves. So Kazama, he's shown some signs of really high level talent, but just hasn't. I think the striking has been an area that he's kind of gotten outclassed on. So watching for that. Otherwise, the card is okay. There'll be some bright spots on there, I think, with you know, Chepe Mariscal versus Damon Jackson, Cruz Gutierrez versus Quang Le. That should be really exciting. Always kind of interested to watch Chelsea Chandler fight. For whatever reason, she's a fighter that I think is interesting. But the only other thing that I'll mention for this weekend is that Shui Combat is making their promotional debut in Xinjiang province. What is Shui Combat? So Shui Combat, or Ibe Shui Gado, or Water Combat, is a new Chinese promotion started by my friend, a guy that you're probably, many of you are familiar with, Ren Zhongxian, who is the owner of China Top Team. He's connected to a lot of well-known Chinese fighters, Shai Lan, Li Jingliang, many more. He is starting a promotion in China called Shui Combat, hoping that it's going to be a recurring event, not just a one-off. They went out and they got freaking Tai Laka Nuaraji to main event their first show. They tried so hard to get any opponent to step up and fight Tailaka, but oh, saying my sound is out again. It's not saying that it's out. Everything's connected. Let me know if you can hear me. Give me a comment. Shoot. Okay. Let me grab one thing. Okay, is that any better? Let me know. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Still no sound. What the heck? Oh, gosh. All right. How about this, guys? Better? Not good? Let me know if you can hear it. Sorry, I know I'm not saying anything. It's not just me. There's no sound yet. Okay. Shoot. What is going on with this freaking mic? Yeah, everything's plugged in, so okay, let's see. I don't really know what else to do. Everything's plugged in. How about this? Is this any better? You guys good? Something with all right. Okay. What's this? This good? This should be good. Are we good? Oh, what a mess. Jimmy says we're good. Sound is back. Hey, we're back. Sorry about that. I have had the worst time with my freaking Canon camera. that I live stream with, let me show you, is I'm able to do this because this sucker is, this is a very old camera. This is what I do my live streaming with, take pictures with. So it's a pretty old camera by now. And to stream with this, I have to have like the Canon software. And my laptop and the software went through an update over the last week between this show and last week's show. And then I was like panicking because I was trying to set up my interview with Ding Meng this afternoon, and this sucker wouldn't connect to the computer. And I worked so hard on it. And then I worked on it all afternoon after that, before the show, and it worked for like 5 seconds, and then it didn't. So usually I run my audio through here. And so I've got a little bit different audio setup today. And I'm just going through my webcam. I already ordered a part for it. So these are things that I never thought would happen to me when I was doing live streaming. I thought, I'm a tech guy, I can figure this out. Anyways, let's hop back in. Gosh, what were we even talking about? We were talking about we were talking about Toshiomi Kazama, talking about his big shot. Yeah, he has to win the fight this weekend or else he's going to get cut. So let's take a look at your questions this week. Rain saying the Elvis Brenner of being lend as a tenor. That's over my head. Jordan Vucenic has been fun to watch at ACA, but the UFC wanted to put him on Contender Series. How blind are the UFC scouts? Well, there are the only ways it seems to get signed to the UFC. Actually, I don't even know anymore. I don't know what separates someone from Contender Series with just like outright UFC signing. There's fighters like Kai Asakura that obviously warrant a UFC contract. And then I saw today that the UFC, it had been kind of in the works for a long time, but I saw officially today at the UFC had signed Alexandre Topuria, Ilya's younger brother, and he's like 5-1. So definitely not the kind of resume of like a Kai Asakura. And so I'm like, okay, so why didn't that guy get on Contender Series? And then like you have fighters on the Contender Series that have tons and tons of fights. Like Ding Meng is 34-8. It doesn't make sense anymore to me, to be frank. And then you have like Sagid Isagokmaev from one championship that's on Contender Series. I don't even know anymore. So like Jordan Vucenic. I'm gonna go with Vucenic. A lot of those Cage Warriors guys, like I feel like there's a lot of Cage Warriors guys that are going to Contender Series this year. You've got Lonar Kavanaugh, you've got Luke Riley. I feel like it's been forever since we had a Cage Warriors guy just go directly to the UFC, aside from just short notice replacements. So I don't even know what to tell you anymore. You know, for Jordan Vucenic, I'm going to say it different every time. For him, like he's kind of had like a slow rise, you know, he was like almost there. And then I think he lost a fight and then he kind of built himself back up. So I don't know. I don't know what the conversations are like in the UFC of like, let's wait just a little bit longer, or let's sign this guy at 5-1. Obviously divisions that are a little bit more thin, like flyweight, like heavyweight, some of the women's divisions are the path to get in is way shorter. Most likely you're not going to have to go through Contender Series, at least for a lot of those fighters. So, but is Topuria, what is he? Is he bantamweight? Is he flyweight? It could have just been also something to do with Ilya Topuria just like straight up begging them, you know, or making that a condition, or Alexandre Topuria. The guy fights at bantamweight. So he's just got a 5-1 record. He's only got one win over a fighter with a winning record, which is, oh man, yeah, you just wonder if this guy's ready. He hasn't really fought for like a big promotion either. That's totally, some people look back at like the Nick Maximov sign, or the what was that guy who was the friend of Nick Diaz that got signed to the UFC? Martin Sano. He totally wasn't UFC level. He just kind of got brought in because he was friends with someone. So, yeah, it is making less and less sense to me as time goes on. Contender Series just totally muddies everything up. Some fighters, I'm like, what are you waiting on? Like, this guy is everything you want him to be. So there has to be things going on behind the scenes, or sometimes I do know sometimes fighters say, I'd rather wait, to sign with the UFC until I have a little bit more experience, or kind of waiting out to try to get a better deal. Sometimes that's a part of it as well. So I don't know if that was part of it with Jordan, but it very well could have been. So after every Dern win, I keep seeing people say that if she had striking and wrestling, she would be an all-time great. Oh, those are two pretty big things. It's like saying, imagine saying, if this fighter could just strike, wrestle, and grapple well, then they'd be amazing. Well, that's like almost the whole game, right? Find it silly since she gets girls like Lamoche or Yan down, but she can't finish when she gets girls to the ground for extended periods. Why are people so obsessed with hoping Dern becomes champion? She's uncoachable and a middle of the pack fighter. She did look better in her last fight. I did think her hands looked a little bit better. So I think uncoachable is a little bit of a, I think that's a little bit of an overstatement of her ability to grow and progress. But, she is a winsome fighter for a lot of people. She has a personality that people like. People tend to gravitate when fighters come into MMA with like a really decorated background in another martial art like jiu-jitsu or kickboxing. They already kind of have like a big fan base built in. People really, I think, like to see a really good specialist transition to MMA. So I think, just trying to think, why does Mackenzie Dern already have this big fan base? I think that is probably a little bit why a lot of people would love to see her become champion. I think there's something gratifying for a lot of fans about seeing a specialist become a UFC champion in 2024. It sort of defies a lot of the logic of the perfectly well-rounded fighter to see someone who's a specialist really lean on their area of specialty all the way to a championship level. So I think that's kind of the appeal of it. You see that with Alex Pereira. You see that with Israel Adesanya. Even you saw that with like a Ryan Hall, a Damian Maia. Like, there's a lot of people that liked those fighters just because it is cool to see someone who has a endlessly deep knowledge of one area of MMA. And so I think that's why when Mackenzie Dern made her UFC debut, even I remember watching her previously, like in LFA, in Invicta. That was what was so appealing, is as soon as the fight gets to the ground, it is such a rush. It's so interesting to see them work on the ground. And, your criticism may be correct, like not able to keep people down, sometimes having trouble finishing. But so maybe that allure has worn off a little bit. And the initial Mackenzie Dern signing and charge to the top has had lots of interruptions. So maybe she's lost a little bit of that steam. But either way, I think she is a fighter that appeals to a lot of people. And she's got wins over fighters that are a little bit more one-dimensional, but she did show some improvement in her last fight. So we'll see what happens at some point. How old is Mackenzie Dern? At some point, she's going to age out of the division, and it's not going to matter. So she's 31, so she still has a good bit of time. Lupi Godinez is a really solid fighter, very athletic, good wrestler. And so that's definitely not a win to turn your nose up at all. But you know, we'll see what's next. Yeah, I'm not really sure. She's just you're absolutely right that she's just kind of stayed in the middle of the pack for a while. So we'll see. Read on Go Substack that it's important not to get caught up in hyperbole after a good performance, that we should appreciate and evaluate. Why do people get caught up in hyperbole? Because because of hype, and because of recency bias. A fighter that scores a big knockout, you start to wonder what else is possible. You know, they're able to score this upset. They were able to have this really impressive performance. Our minds in MMA, as MMA fans and media and pundits, we automatically start thinking towards what's next. What are the possibilities? Given this impressive performance, what could they do against an even better fighter? So that could probably lead to a little bit of hyperbole and overvaluing certain wins, especially if the matchup at a baseline was already a pretty favorable matchup for them. So I think that's probably why we get caught up in hyperbole. It's hard to totally avoid it though, right? No one wants to be have the total personality of a wet blanket, but you know, it is smart to take a step back for sure. Do you know the story of Hideo Tokoro? Not really. Drake Riggs explained it on MMA Media. First KO in 20 years. Even Slack mentioned that he is a legend in his own right. Do I agree? I do. Yeah. I mean, how old is Hideo Tokoro? He's also pretty. I didn't even realize until he fought recently that he was at all still fighting, and you know, that's a pretty common thing with Japanese MMA fighters fighting into their 40s. Let's just take a look at this guy real quick. You'll see he's got a lot of fights, over 70 fights on his record. So ridiculous amount of experience. 46-year-old bantamweight. Let's go back to him kind of. So he goes all the way back to the year 2000. He fought, for a long, long time, early 2000s. Eventually fought K1 when they're promoting MMA fights. Win over Brad Pickett, Royler Gracie, a draw against Royce Gracie. So a lot of the big titans of that era. Brad Pickett, I wouldn't say is a titan of another era, but you know what I mean. Good fighter. Joachim Hansen. So he fought for Dream. That was such a cool organization. If you ever had the chance to watch that. And then, he's been fought a couple times for Ryzen, and then was mostly on the grappling side of things. A lot of exhibition. Came back Ryzen 26 and beat Shinobu Ota. And then, so he's honestly stayed pretty consistent with competition. And then he beats Hiroya Kondo by first round TKO. So yeah, I mean, just honestly, by merit of longevity, he is a legend. You know, I need to check in on Drake's coverage of him, but I mean, that kind of longevity and really consistency as well is really incredible. There's something in the water in Japan where fighters that are into their 40s can sometimes have a good bit of success, even like not at, you know, the light heavyweight level. So super impressive for sure. Is it possible for UFC to go to China this year? Last year, lots of Chinese fans were angry that they could not see the UFC last year. I would say it's doubtful that we'll get a Chinese event. There's not a lot of openings left in the UFC schedule, to be honest. Their November or October schedule is booked up. Their November schedule, I'm pretty sure we already know the locations or likely locations of all of those. and there may just be a couple dates open in December that maybe they could pull something out if they try to do a Road to UFC finals, which I do think they're going to try to do the Road to UFC finals before the end of 2024. So there is some hope there. October, we've already got all the cities there public. November, those first 3 weeks, probably going to be Edmonton, probably going to be Las Vegas at the Apex, and then probably New York City on the 16th. I'm guessing they won't do the last week of November because that's kind of the Thanksgiving, US Thanksgiving era kind of time of year. And then in December, we know one of those dates probably going to go like the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st. One of those dates, I'm guessing either the 21st or the 14th, is going to be UFC 210. Guessing that'll be a pay-per-view in Las Vegas at the T-Mobile Arena. So you could see an event December 7th or December 21st if they went that far towards Christmas. But yeah, so there's really not a whole lot of openings. But one of those, it wouldn't surprise me if one of those was an Asian country, either Singapore, or they could try to make China happen. But I don't know where they're at right now in terms of actually getting a permit approved for a Chinese city. They've been turned down twice. You could see an event in Macau if they're not booked up at that time. So that's something you could watch for. If they can't get to mainland China, they could try to get to Macau. So I think that is the most likely thing. One of those weeks in December, you see that. Are Weili's weaknesses in striking permanent? Are you saying that her team does a terrible job preparing her striking defense? No, not necessarily. Be careful how you answer this because I have the ability to clip and send this to her manager and coach. No, I've never said that, and I've never believed that anyone's weaknesses are permanent. Even if you have a bad chin, you get knocked out easily, you can increase your striking defense and get better with that. So no one's weaknesses otherwise I would say are totally permanent. So absolutely not. And I mean, if it's not a matter of opinion if someone's getting hit. So the fact is that she has sometimes had a little bit of an issue moving her head and dodging punches, but those can all be fixed. And, I'm not saying that she has bad striking defense. I'm not saying that she has big liabilities on the feet, but for whatever reason, opponents have been able to find her in several fights. Now, I do think she's gotten better with that as well. She is, if you compare like the Limoges fight to if you compare to the Limoges fight to like the first Joanna fight, she's gotten a lot better. So definitely a lot of improvement there. And I know that their team works really hard on that. But it's hard to be invincible. So no one's perfect. Definitely no shade on Zhang. Is the PFL metrics confusing to you? Should they take the less is more approach? I would appreciate that. The stats, the only stat that's confusing to me is the AI score. I still don't know how that's calculated. So what the PFL will do, as you're referring to, they will, at the end of the fight, they'll show you like who the commentators think won, and then they'll show you the AI score, which is a computer that's evaluating the fight. But we don't, as far as I know, have any idea what the behind the scenes is on that. What are they doing? Are they literally just, my guess is that they're just compiling the stats round by round, and the stats, they're painting the story from the stats. And to their credit, more often than not, the AI score is correct in the winner. But the problem that I've and many others have pointed out is that only looking at stats does not tell you the whole story of a fight. Especially, it is more accurate when you're looking at the stats round by round, but a stat still doesn't show you the variance of impact for each strike. It doesn't show you the most dramatic moments of the round. So even you can't just look at strikes and predict the winner of a fight. Having the differentiation between significant strikes and strikes does help a little bit with that, but it's not a foolproof predictor. So I'm guessing that's how the AI score, the computer scores things. I don't really know, to be honest. And so that is a little bit confusing to me. And I don't need that. If you want to show who the commentators thought won, that's great. John McCarthy, if you want to show who he thought won, that's fine. That's at least like kind of helpful because they are experts in judging MMA fights. But the other things, it's like I understand what they mean, but I don't really understand the significance of them. The speed of a punch, the speed of a kick. These things are hard. They're hard for me to really judge and evaluate. It's like in baseball, if you have a pitcher, you can line up who pretty easily, like who throws the fastest. That's pretty easy to compare pitchers across the board. But should I be comparing a flyweight to a heavyweight, or with PFL bantamweight to a heavyweight? And a heavyweight may not throw a punch as fast, but may still have a lot of force, And so like, it's almost like the most accurate stat if you're trying to measure punching power would be like, and then it's like what punches too. It's like jabs, uppercuts, hooks. So hard to know it, but it's like force plus speed, trying to measure like the impact, and then weighted for that particular weight class, which I have no idea how you would ever do. So the stats to me, the extra stats, I don't really know what to do with when we're measuring speed as well. All the other stuff, I mean, like all the same stuff that UFC has, different kinds of strikes to the body, leg strikes, head strikes, submissions, takedowns, all that stuff. That's always really helpful. It's just a general guide to help you broadly know the story of the fight and different things that happened, even if it doesn't exactly tell you who the winner is. So that's. I do appreciate the less is more. I don't, it's like, why is PFL doing this? It's because they're trying to stack up to other pro sports. For some reason, it always seems like they're trying to stack up to baseball in a lot of ways, which I've never understood why baseball would be a sport that you feel like you can pull from to make MMA more appealing and successful. Because baseball is not, I mean, I personally actually really like watching baseball. Not that I do it much, but I enjoy watching it, but it's by far not the most popular American sport. So I don't really know why they're like, it seems like they're modeling a lot of things off of that. It's interesting to me for sure. Deep question. Does the UFC have an image problem? With the ESPN deal, so too came the eyes of the mainstream fans, including the attention of media outlets such as Barstool Sports and Full Send, among others. With that attention came a slew of fans otherwise unfamiliar with the sport and its rigors, leading to a culture of disrespect and foolishness that stretches from the fans to the media outlets that represent them. Does UFC have an image problem? Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there that you said. So, I wouldn't say that we've talked about the increasing toxicity of MMA fans over the years. I would say that's more a function of our general broader postmodern culture that is saturated with social media and has trouble filtering themselves on social media. I would say a lot of that is more social media trends and behaviors and cultures rather than the UFC just going more mainstream. So I push back on that. I do wonder if the UFC has a little bit, like the UFC has really, they've only gone further towards the right wing bro science culture. And I don't feel like they're going to I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So you look at like X under Elon Musk and the bear of a time that they've had to get advertisers. So many advertisers have left the platform. They're like, I mean, I follow a couple people on social media that talk about a lot of the statistics with various social media sites. And yeah, just like X's earnings are just plummeting. Like they're losing billions more every year. And the biggest function of that is the advertising. And I've seen even like emails from advertisers that X reached out to try to get to their platform. And they responded back saying like, basically the image problem, we don't want to be associated with Elon Musk. We don't want to be associated with the brand that he's creating. And I do wonder if there's going to be limits where the UFC is off limits to certain advertisers. That's the biggest issue I have. For some reason, I don't feel like ESPN cares that whole much, but a whole lot. But I do wonder if there's a lot of potential advertisers that the UFC can't really get because of their image. So that would be the biggest thing. I mean, they're not on the flip side, they're not having any trouble increasing the money that they're getting from advertising and brand deals, all of these things. So I'm not saying they have an issue with that, but I do wonder if they could be even making more with different advertisers, especially if they have multiple quarters that they can kind of be competitive with and increase, what they could earn. So that is where I think you could be onto something with them having a little bit of an image problem. So I'm kind of comparing it to Elon Musk's X. I don't know if it's quite that extreme. I mean, that's been a pretty messy ordeal that they're dealing with. And, UFC they've aligned themselves with Donald Trump. They've linked up sometimes with people like Tucker Carlson, which I don't know. It's not, I wouldn't say it's as bad as like the spot that Elon Musk is in, but yeah, they might. How angry would you be and Weili's haters if you found out that she's decided not to fight this year? I saw a Weibo post that she is in Paris and just got an award at the Champions Night. I wouldn't be mad at all. No. Especially I don't know. I will say this, as a champion, you can't just if you're healthy and if you're healthy and you're able to fight, you don't have some big thing that's preventing you from competing. It's get a move on it. There's a lot of reasons not to fight, but if you're just kind of yeah, I'm just going to take a long time off and I don't want to fight. It's I feel like as a champion, a lot of fighters can afford to do that, but as a champion, you can't just, I guess, arbitrarily hold up the division for a long time. So, I do feel like as a champion, you owe that to the division to keep things moving. If you're not going to fight in a reasonable amount of time and you're totally healthy, there's no obstacles, then what's going on here? You're a champion, this is your job, the rest of us, at our jobs, we don't usually get to dictate, I'm going to work this time. I'm just going to take if anyone has a good reason to not fight, then yeah, that's okay. if you're not going to fight for the rest of the year. But you know, I wouldn't be angry. You know, I don't really get angry that much with MMA. You run Tapology. I work for Tapology. I don't run Tapology. I manage several areas of the fighter records. Did it have a different name in the past? And did you get paid to keep records accurate? So I don't think it had a different name in the past. And it's more like the way it works. I'm trying to think how much to share with, like, because you do get paid working for Tapology, but it's not so much. It's not so much, getting paid like an hourly rate. It's the work is congruent to what you're putting in. So, or the pay is congruent to like how much you put in. So, if I spent, I would get paid more if there's like a whole event that doesn't exist in Tapology with say 12 fights. I would get paid more for putting in that whole event rather than like if there was one fight that we were spending a lot of time trying to verify if it was accurate or not. I don't really get paid for that per se, but obviously if there are standards of like, if I'm going to put in a fight, I have to have a really, really good reason to believe that that's accurate. So, even sometimes like, if there is a record of this fight, like if we can find some other website that has a record of the fight being accurate, that's not always just like a slam dunk that we should enter it into the database. Usually, like a lot of times, going through mixedmartialarts.com. I don't know if you guys have been there. It's the underground. They've got they've got a really good records database especially for the US. Really good records database. So I'll go through there and I'll add fights, and I don't feel like I have to like double check it. But like earlier this week, there was an Asian MMA event that happened a couple weeks ago. And there's no doubt in my mind it was legit. I mean, I saw videos from it. I talked about it beforehand. Like, it was 100% a legit event. And but working with the editors at Tapology, they were like, do we have a YouTube? Because it was a new promoter. So they just wanted to make sure that things were above board. So like before we added them into the database, we got YouTube videos sent to us. We had to reach out to some people to have them send us videos. So even for that, yeah, we did take some extra precautions. But if something is like proven, if we have a long-term relationship, or like if it's a promoter, usually there's not much of a reason to have to like double check things and ask for a video. So so with that, yeah, there are measures we take to make sure things are accurate. And if things are not accurate, then like, yeah, then that puts me on pretty shaky legs. There's been a time or two where I've put in something that we later found out wasn't totally accurate. Like maybe once. I can't even remember what the situation was, but yeah, that was definitely like, man, we really, really got to make sure things are like, they take their accuracy so seriously. And because of that, I do too. And sometimes it's hard to know, even sometimes when you have a video, things are tricky to interpret. So, yeah, that can be tricky, but no, there's not an extra bonus for just that kind of accuracy. The UFC has been able to generate the most income with the least expenses as of late, populating Apex card after Apex card with subpar talent. What's the damage? Does it ingrain to new fans that Apex slop is the new standard of highest level of fighting? That is an interesting point of like, there's probably a lot of UFC fans that don't even remember the days 4 or 5 years ago when 3 weeks out of the month we were getting an event in a different city. You know, they're just fights. They're nowadays, like, fights are fights, and a lot of newer fans don't really see what the big problem is. You get fights, you pay for ESPN Plus, you get the fights all the same. Why do you care if they're in a big building or a small building? Why do you care how many people are there? Fights are fights, right? So I feel like that's probably the perspective of a lot of new fans for sure. Fortunately, Dana did say that they're doing a multi-million-dollar overhaul of the Apex this year to be able to add in more fans. So at the very least, 1,000 fans in there, I think even for me would make me feel a little more receptive to the Apex cards. You know, I don't think that things are going to be like they are today forever. For me, it's like we get every month we get a pay-per-view. We usually get another card in another city other than Las Vegas. So we get like 2 cards a month outside of the Apex, and then we'll get 1 or 2 in the Apex. At this point, I don't really care a whole lot. Like, there's 2 a month. The Apex cards a lot of times are pretty missable. Every once in a while they'll be good. Coming up, we've got the September 7th show that looks really, really good. Stacked oddly very well on September 7th. So we do have that. It's gotten to the point to me where it doesn't really get under my skin as much as it used to. It seems like we've gotten a little bit more on the road, of an on the road schedule this year than last year, but very just a little bit more. So, but I think you're right. Probably a lot of fans don't know the difference. Skipping past the sound wackiness. Heard on a previous Hey Not the Face podcast that while the UFC is a monopolistic control over the market and the fans, UFC is relatively insulated, at least on a consumer level. Agree. I'm trying to discern what you mean by insulated. Yeah, I'm not sure if I know what you mean by that. By being insulated. Hit me up if you want to clarify. Do I think that the UFC should just purchase ACA and they will bring in heaps of exciting talent? The problem with that is that there are a lot of fighters with ACA that would probably have a brick of a time fighting in the US. We've seen their issues with Khamzat Chimaev. There's another guy, I don't know if you remember him, Merbek Taisumov, who was a Chechnyan fighter a couple years ago, who, as far as I know, is retired but still under UFC contract just because he had such a hard time getting visas. Just imagine if there was like 25 more Khamzat Chimaev situations. Not the UFC's ideal situation. Now, imagine this. Imagine the UFC wants to go far deeper with their relationship in the Middle East, with Abu Dhabi and with Saudi Arabia. Imagine this. Let's say once a month. This is all coming together in my head. Let's say once a month, the UFC holds a fight night show in the Middle East, Abu Dhabi or Riyadh. And say they buy something like ACA, they basically just circulate those fighters throughout those cards. And they can also put other fighters, you know, the other fighters that would typically be on a lot of these Middle East shows can pop up from here and there. But I do wonder if, and the big thing with this, the big question mark and reservation I've had with UFC and PFL in the Middle East is the demand for it. it seems like there's a modest demand, but it doesn't seem like there's an insatiable demand for MMA in the Middle East. So that's where I kind of wonder. I mean, I know a lot of ACA's fighters are from Europe, but it I would think that a lot of those fighters would have a much easier time fighting in there because we see Khamzat Chimaev fighting there. It's kind of a place where fighters that have trouble getting visas don't have trouble getting visas there. So that would be an interesting situation. I've always wondered, like, what is the future of the UFC's relationship in the Middle East? In Russia, nothing's happening anytime soon. They were starting to put on shows in Russia, kind of like 2016, 17, 18. And, that's over for a while. So, but it seems like the UFC product is such a perfect fit for, like, those Caucasus Mountain republics in Russia and the in Georgia and the Middle East, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia. It seems like so much of the UFC product really does fit that culture, because I would kind of consider it like a hyper masculine culture. And so I think UFC really does fit that. So I've wondered, like, what's the future of UFC in this region? Are they going to go to some other areas in the Caucasus area? Could they ever go to, like, Tbilisi, Georgia? Could they ever go, even somewhere like Belarus or Serbia, or just some of these areas that I think they could have a good experience there? But for the Middle East, we just heard today, I think it was Damon Martin that posted that the UFC got paid a $20 million site fee for their show in Saudi Arabia. And they're planning on, like, a big event. Can't remember if he said a pay-per-view or not, but, and there was a time too where Dana was talking about, like, we're working on something with Abu Dhabi. Wait till you see what we're working on there. I think a lot of us assumed it was like a PI, but I think that still could be in the works. But if you do get something like a PI, we're developing more Middle Eastern talent. You got PFL MENA as well. So, yeah, I'm curious what the future is in that area. I don't think the UFC would ever buy ACA, but thinking about fighters that would fight with ACA, kind of fighters from Dagestan, Chechnya, Ingushetia, all those republics in the Caucasus area, like, they could, a lot of them have a future in the Middle East for sure. Did I see the Dana White interview on CNN? No, I didn't. It takes so much in me to motivate myself to watch. Like, did you see the Tucker Carlson interview? Did you see the Fox and Friends interview? Like, no, I didn't. Like, these are so hard for me to get through, and I know I need to watch them, but guys, it's just hard. Where he said that his company is not political at the same time UFC, while at the same time literally talking at the Republican National Convention. Well, UFC is an arm of the Trump campaign. I know there's no way you can say that with a straight face, right? UFC is a political company. It is as simple as that. Here's why I think Dern is uncoachable. She talks about working on her wrestling in every pre-fight interview and never shows it. Fair enough. Tired of people saying that if she added X, she would beat every girl. Right. I mean, you could say that about any fighter, really. So I agree with you there. Heard this issue being spoken about on MMA Hour. Why is it so hard to get universal health care for fighters fighting under the UFC banner? So in the United States, Huang, I'm not sure if you live outside the US or inside, but in the United States, healthcare is, anyone can just buy healthcare. It's what I do. I just went out to websites and bought healthcare, but usually healthcare through an employer is only provided to part-time employees. There are exceptions. I did at one time work for a bank where I worked 30 hours a week and they provided healthcare. So that was cool. But most of the time, healthcare in the United States is only provided to full-time employees, full-time employee. You can see where it gets a little bit tricky for a UFC fighter. Not only are they not classified as employees, but what do you consider as full-time? Other sports entities where a fighter signs to the Dallas Mavericks, they're a full-time employee. They go in and train as a team. They play, so you can classify them as a full-time employee. Full-time in the US, generally considered 40 hours or more. So that's that is like probably the most technical barrier for UFC fighters getting full healthcare. Probably what the UFC does is that they have recommendations for healthcare, and they maybe give them a discount, have kind of preferred networks. So healthcare in the US is very, very bad. It's ranks among the lowest in countries in kind of our development block or economic block. We're consistently among the lower end, despite paying the most. We pay the most and get the least. So it's really bad. And as someone who in the last 5 years has seen probably like 30 to 40 different doctors for different things, it's really bad. And I won't go down that tangent, but just like getting healthcare is so confusing and difficult. It's a lot easier when you're a full-time employee and your employer just sends you an email saying, fill this out, the premium's going to come out of your paycheck, but like, this is our healthcare, here you go. Whereas like, for me to get healthcare, so I have a couple part-time jobs, and there's like certain windows that you can only sign up for healthcare at certain times throughout the year. Sometimes you can't. There's like little shortcuts. It's just such a complicated system. It's very expensive. It could be like several $100s a month, and that only gets you in the door. Then you still have to like pay for a lot of the healthcare. So, and that's not even to say the quality of the healthcare may not be great. So, it's a really bad, poorly drawn out system unless you're owning a pharmaceutical company or running a hospital or something like that. Then it's a great system for you. But so I'm guessing probably the UFC has some guidance for fighters to be able to get healthcare, but since they're not full-time employees, they can't get it. If a sports company can give its workers a 50% revenue split like the NBA or NFL, then it's thriving as a business. Is it exploitative to you that the UFC doesn't give its fighters 50% of the revenue? Yes, I would definitely say it's exploitative to not give them more than what they're getting. The 17, 18% that they're what they're getting, I would say that's exploitative, especially when you're recording record profits year over year over year. Then absolutely it's exploitative. The 50% number, I have a hard time attaching myself too deeply to that number. Even though, yes, the UFC is making record profits every year. Yes, they should be paying their fighters more. I can't personally say that like today they would have the business model to be able to go up to 50%. The NBA and the UFC's business model is a lot different. So each have costs that the other doesn't have. A lot of things are different. So it's hard for me to just definitively say they should be paying 50%. They absolutely could do that today. But they are totally owed more than what they're paying for sure. I'm one of the few that find PFL cool since they bought Bellator, mainly because the matchups are intriguing, but the promotional bells and whistles, as well as odd choices, make me shake my head. True or false? Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely not a PFL hater. There are a lot of things I watch them with a lot of interest. Maybe not like every single fight, although I would say the roster does get better year over year. It seems like it is a product that is improving. it doesn't seem like they're just stuck and to where they're just plateauing. Bellator felt like it was just plateauing. They were getting good fighters, but then they were losing fighters. It didn't seem like they were ever growing. Didn't seem like they were ever going to go anywhere different than where they were at, especially the last couple of years. And I don't know if PFL will ever reach a stage where it feels like they've plateaued. If their quality of fights and fighters stays the same, their broadcast deals are the same, they could get there. But it seems like they are an organization that every year they're coming out with another league and they're changing up the roster a lot. I would appreciate if they had a little bit more openness to change their format. I also understand why they're not wanting to just like change up the format a bunch every year. I think it is smart if you really believe in your format to like give it some time to really see if we can work out the kinks. But yeah, I think if PFL stopped trying to just stamp other sports leagues' characteristics onto their own, and if they really just embrace themselves as like an MMA league, I think I heard Luke Thomas say that MMA it's a renegade kind of rogue sport. I think that's what you really have to go as far as MMA can go. I think if you're trying to clean it up, polish it up, make it look like the same as all the other sports leagues, eventually you're going to plateau. But no, I like PFL a lot. I really like a lot of the people that are involved. I'm always interested to see how they're growing, what they're throwing in the mix. Even if I don't agree with every single quote innovation that they have, I'm at least glad to see them trying to do it, if that makes any sense. So no, I'm rooting for the PFL. Like I would love to see them succeed and be able to carve out their own loyal fan base, because I think everyone wins with that. And there's only like the field of MMA fighters is only growing, right? As MMA becomes more popular around the world, like the pool of really good MMA fighters is going to grow. And so I think there's room for the UFC to have a roster of 700 fighters. And I think there's room for the PFL to have a roster of a couple hundred really good fighters too. I actually think that there's room for both to succeed. So yeah, I like watching PFL grow and develop, and hopefully they just keep working out the kinks, establishing and connecting with fans. I think that's something they really they're getting better at, but could stand to keep growing in, is like really connecting and having their own loyal fan base for sure. Asked this question on different podcasts, but why are some people who cover MMA but can never say anything interesting about it? Should they learn to be more thoughtful, or is it something different entirely? Well, I think that's what separates kind of the A-list, people that have really found a niche with MMA with people who haven't. My guess is that a lot of those folks have a really deep passion for MMA personally, but just haven't really figured out their niche. I think that's probably where they would be stuck. I don't think everyone in the media needs to have necessarily like super unique opinions, but I do think you need to have something that you're known for. If that's a niche, even if that's just like what I do, I write articles about Asian MMA. I let you guys know what's coming up on Twitter, X, Instagram, YouTube. Provide a little bit of analysis here and there. Again, as you all point out, yeah, it's not the most in-depth analysis that you're going to find, but I try to like just cover a lot of different things with Asian MMA. Try to think about like, what is there a hunger for that lines up with what I'm passionate about and I feel like I can speak to. So I don't feel like I have to be someone who's the most philosophical, who has the deepest knowledge of economics and business. Like I've never felt like I have to be that guy. As long as I'm enjoying my niche. So there's a lot of people that have a deep passion for MMA that just haven't found that yet. So I think that's probably the holdup. Off topic and random question. What's your favorite dessert? Ooh, or do you not like sweets to begin with? No, I love sweets. I am a dessert fiend. I pretty much love not too sugary, not too tart, not where it's going to make my mouth bleed, but I do like really sugary things. I'm a full-blooded American, and probably like if you're just like you're like, every day, every year, if it's my birthday, my mom's French silk pie. It's a homemade crust. It's super basic. It's a very basic dessert, but it's just like a kind of chocolate cream with whipped cream and chocolate chips on top. It's just what I've always it's what I've always had my whole life. Like that's just been my lifelong birthday dessert. And I always look forward to it. I always ask for it every year if I'm in the same city as my parents. It's very basic, but it's light, it's fluffy, it's really chocolatey. I love pretty much all forms of chocolate. So sometimes I will run to the grocery store and get like the chocolatiest ice cream that they have. I'll get just like a little tub. Sometimes it'll be like a Ben and Jerry's. I'll do this a lot of times if I'm watching an event, like an MMA event, like kind of halfway through the event, especially if I don't have to provide a whole lot of hands-on coverage. I'll even like put on ESPN Plus or like whatever YouTube and put it up on my car and drive to the store and grab a small little tub of ice cream. We've got a brand here in Oregon called Tillamook. It's actually the factory's in a town called Tillamook, and it's like a dairy brand that is just super, super creamy. Some of the best ice cream I've ever had. So that is always really cheap, usually at the grocery store. So I'll get that. The other only, I mean, I could go on. I should start a desserts podcast, but the dessert, this is like a borderline dessert, but like the thing that I make really good popcorn. Really, really good popcorn. I put it on a stovetop, a big pot, put some oil in the bottom, and then just put the loose kernels in there. And I've just like, and my mom kind of helped me get started, but I feel like I've fine-tuned it. It's just like, yeah, it's just like loose kernels in there and then just lightly salted. But I moved into this place a month ago, and I have this new roommate, and I made it for him the other week. And now he's already like, hey man, can you make some popcorn tonight? Like, yeah, bro, I can. So that's another thing I go hard on is the popcorn for sure. So Gene, you're asking about like an insulated fan base. Insulated as in keep the fan base while growing relatively niche. That's interesting to think about. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you asked if the UFC has a pretty insulated consumer base. I think there's probably a lot of the consumer base also consumes other sports products. You're right that there's not a whole lot of other MMA. Like the common UFC fan probably doesn't watch other MMA. So like it would take a lot of work. PFL, they have you're saying like the fan base is not growing. Yeah, that's interesting. It's hard for me to know. We always talk about like fan turnover. I feel like it's like every 5 years there's a lot of fan turnover. And so I don't know if I can necessarily speak to like why fans burn out or lose interest in MMA. It could be that they really get attached to just like one fighter and they kind of follow that fighter through the really glory years of that fighter's career. And then when that fighter kind of flames out, they lose interest. You know, Conor McGregor, a perfect example. George St. Pierre could be another example. Brock Lesnar, you know, someone could tune into UFC just to watch Brock, and then once he's out of the picture, they don't really watch. So it could be something like that, I think, as well. But I would say the UFC fan base is actually growing globally. At least in the US, I'm not really sure if it is growing North America, but I would imagine probably like Mexico, it's growing in Latin America. I bet in Africa, these are all just guesses here. It's probably like steadily growing in the Middle East. I feel like it's definitely growing. It's definitely growing in like China, Southeast Asia. It's growing a lot. So I actually do think the MMA fan base is growing, but just globally. Maybe in the establishment markets, it's plateaued a lot, especially like Brazil. I'm not sure if that market has grown much the last couple of years. So it's kind of different all over the place, and that all those markets give different valuations to broadcast deals. And on the flip side, the fan base is sometimes reflective of what kind of broadcast deal they have as well. So it's hard to accurately pin that down, I think. Do I think the TKO represented media members that cover MMA are the most negative? Like Full Send are the most negative. I'm guessing you're talking about like most negative for the sport. And it sounds like you're kind of talking about some of like the media groups that the UFC seems to have a really strong relationship with, like Barstool, and thinking about Nina and Full Send, Kevin Iole. I know they're not like maybe technically represented by TKO or connected to TKO, you know, paid by them, but it does seem like they really just like they have their hands fully in the UFC pot. So I actually have a different perspective than most on those media outlets, media members, is that a lot of them can connect to fans that maybe wouldn't have. I think that they can connect to a casual fan base that a lot of the other media outlets can't, and they could be a funnel for MMA fans. A funnel meaning like, how did you get into MMA? Well, I saw the Nelk boys talking about them, and so I watched UFC, and now I'm like a really hardcore UFC fan, and I actually watch most of the events, and now I'm actually watching some other MMA too. So it's a funnel, you know. So I actually have that level of appreciation for them, and I have some appreciation for them in that, like, there are some things that they are really good at. They're good at being on air hosts. They're good at entertaining, different things that like a lot of the rest of the media industry, we would love to be able to have. We would love to be able to captivate people the way that they can. I don't personally consume really any of that content, just because I choose to surround myself with, I think, media outlets that have a much deeper knowledge of MMA, more of an expertise in MMA. So where their expertise is light, they're really good at entertaining and drawing in a lot of new fans. And while that can create, you know, a fan base that is all over the place, you know, maybe only watches for one fighter, may you know, create some headaches for more hardcore fans. I don't mind it, because at some point, all of us were casual fans, right? So we have to be able to let new people in. So that's kind of how I feel about them. And I think probably the most negative for the sport is like outlets that don't have a connection with the casual fan base and don't have an expertise of MMA. So that would be more like the people that ask the really bad questions at press conferences. That I think is probably the most negative. And then outlets like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't throw people under the bus, or I don't know if I really want to get into that, but I would say, if you don't connect with fans and you don't have expertise in the sport, that's a problem. Pie is incredible. It is. And caramel popcorn is definitely a dessert. It is. I haven't actually put caramel on it before. I usually just, all I do is a little bit of salt, but I have a bag of caramel corn as well. That's good stuff. All right, guys. Hey, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for hanging with me through those horrendous sound issues. I hope that they can update things. I actually think that it was my issue. I think it was more an issue with the software side. I just updated the operating system on my computer today and we got through some things out of whack. So hopefully that's all good next week. I'll be sure to test things. Still waiting to hear back about what my week will look like in Las Vegas in 2 weeks. But I am going to Las Vegas. I've already talked to several people. It's going to be a great week. And I may have more news about some things I'll be able to take part in there. That'll be exciting, but stay tuned for that. Until next week, have a great week and enjoy the fights.